Well, with all the technical difficulties, I apologize here. My name is Rob Carwath, and I'm a consultant to the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation. I've been working with Speak Your Piece for going on 10 years now. I will tell you that I always start my presentation by telling the organization that I started out as a doubter. I was editor of the Duluth News Tribune right when Speak Your Piece was getting started, and we had heard that the Community Foundation was working on a new project to bring a little bit of better times. We didn't even know enough to call it civility at that point, but better times to our community, which was dealing with a lot of trouble and lots of excitement, lots of anticipation. And when the foundation came out with the Speak Your Piece program, it fit on the back of a business card, and it had 9 little tenets. And I carry one of these with me all the time just so I can pull it out and use it for my own benefit. But Speak Your Piece fits on the back of a business card, and it's 9 little rules that we learned when we were in kindergarten and first grade probably. And like a lot of people in Duluth and Superior, we thought, what the heck is this? This could not possibly be the solution to the problems that ail us. But I will tell you that 10 plus years later, it has worked. The doubter has become the evangelist, and so I'm in front of you tonight like I often am. And I will say also, it's been one of the great blessings of my professional career to be able to bring Speak Your Piece to groups like yours. So I appreciate you guys taking time. I think what we'll talk about tonight will be worth your time. It's perhaps there's nothing more important right now than finding ways that communities can work together and work better. So if we look around the world, our communities, our local communities, our state, what do we see? We see a world, a nation, communities of all sizes and kinds divided. Changes everywhere and increasing in both pace and intensity. And it's destabilizing for most of us and for most communities. Rapid change, especially the kind that alters fundamental rules, can be frightening to people. And I think what we're seeing across our country and really around our world, a lot of rapid change, especially in that last year, and people are in a kind of frightened mode. So this leads to concerns about loss of direction, loss of status, loss of jobs, loss of economic security, things we've heard about in our communities in the news. People experiencing this kind of change often start blaming each other and fearing each other, and scarcity thinking sets in. And we end up with a situation where people are behaving in uncivil ways or worse. So what kind of changes are we talking about? Well, where do we see it? We see it in politics, we see it in COVID-19, we see it in discussions about immigration, really nearly all major issues that are coming up on our dashboard. We're seeing arguments and fighting and people not agreeing. Local issues too. Rapid changes in our economic situation, from a manufacturing economy to a service and technology economy with job dislocation. That was really what drove a lot of the issues in Duluth and Superior in the early 2000s. Our community was changing in some ways for the better, but it was different and it was scary for people. We've seen this over the debate over the minimum wage or livable wage. We've seen it in debates over racial and ethnic issues, stuff that has happened in the past year, the racial and social justice reckoning that's happened after the Floyd case, and now with the Floyd trial underway today in Minneapolis. We've seen it in debate in local communities about growth and development and climate issues. So lots of things to discuss, lots of changes happening, and lots of scared people out there when you boil it right down. So how's changing affecting your world in Willmar? Well, I would guess questions about internal operations of the community have been raised, especially since COVID, as you're working to try to serve your community and do the best you can in these extraordinary circumstances. Finding ways that people in the community can work together, even within the city government can work together. Technology has made a lot of changes. We're able to hold meetings like this, even if I can't show you my PowerPoint presentation. it brings good things, but it also brings some challenges. Relationships with your constituents, your vendors, your partners, businesses in town, changing community needs and expectations, growth and development, generational change. All of these things I would imagine come up on a regular basis for you at the City Council as you're talking about ways to serve and improve your community. So my question to you is, how is change affecting your civility? What is the quality of your conversations? Has COVID been a time when you felt maybe we're able to have these conversations in new ways, but is the quality as good as it used to be? Are you working as a team or in a group of teams? Is it one team for the city of Willmar, or is it a bunch of kind of siloed teams working in isolation? How is email, text, and other technology solutions, how are they posing challenges as well as making things better? How are your relationships with your clients at the city, your vendors, your partners, your constituents? How are your relationships and engagement with businesses and other groups within the communities? Are you seeing missed opportunities? Do you worry about missed opportunities because of where we've been and we're not able to get together and work the way we used to? And what does all of this mean for the future of your community in Willmar? Well, I would tell you, and you probably know this, you're not alone. Many communities, maybe all communities, all types, all sizes, are struggling with civility issues. We've seen this in Washington, D.C., down to the local village boards, county government, state government. Many of these challenges are driven by the kind of change that I was talking about earlier, especially the rapid change that we've seen in the past year. And more communities are realizing that they're going to be successful only if they can harness the benefits that change provides. In other words, there's no holding back change. So how can we recognize it's going to be a part of our lives and actually can see change as an opportunity to constantly refresh, to constantly get better, to constantly improve, rather than, oh my gosh, more change, can't deal with it. One of the benefits of change is constant evolution and process improvement. So this is in some ways an opportunity to build new and better ideas and have them coming all the time. But you can't just get there. That sounds a lot different from the world I just described earlier, the first few moments of my presentation here. You've got scared people, and then you've got the benefits of change. How do you get from one to the other? Well, communities have to develop the skills to use change for their benefit. And that means constantly working together to develop innovations, constantly coming together in groups, finding solutions, letting those solutions work for a while, and then having to come back together to find the new solution. So it's a constant process of getting together and working as a group. And that's where civility comes in. And that's where I think we all look up and say, gosh, how can we do that? We can't even agree on some basic stuff. So this is where creating a civil environment is really vital, the notion of civic engagement. And it's really the power of speak your piece. Speak your piece says, I don't have all the right answers. You don't have all the right answers. I'm not opposed to having a difficult conversation with you as we work through some of that, as long as I'm treated civilly. And if I'm treated civilly, I don't mind working through it. I'll come back. I'll ride the roller coaster again if it doesn't throw me out of my seat. And if it's a civil conversation, even if it's a difficult one, I'm willing to come and bring what resources I have, my brain power, my ideas, sometimes other resources, including financial resources. So that idea of civic engagement is why Speak Your Piece was created in Duluth and Superior in 2003. So let's go back to 2003, and you guys know a little bit about our community in Duluth and Superior. Duluth, Minnesota, Superior, Wisconsin, the Twin Ports. We're at the westernmost point of Lake Superior. We're a region of about 200,000 plus. Our region has historically focused on shipping and mining and forestry and manufacturing. It was that heavy industry that came with being a port city. But our economy and really our world started changing fairly rapidly, and that began back in the 1970s. And a lot of the change was good. We were moving from an economy that was based on this heavy industry to an economy that right now the two biggest industries in our community are healthcare and higher education, which are great industries to have, kind of recession-proof in some respects, but a lot different from what people had known. And those weren't the only changes that were rippling through Duluth and Superior over the decades. We were dealing with a lot of change, and we were struggling with a lot of change. A lot of people's mentality, mindset about what it meant to be part of the community was, we are this, and it was hard for them to understand there was change happening that included new people coming to town. It included new needs for our city government. It included new ways of making decisions and operating. So I want to fast forward a little bit to the early 2000s. Duluth at that point was teetering on municipal bankruptcy. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but this was something that was a big deal right about the time I came to town as editor at the Duluth News Tribune. Nobody had really done anything wrong, but employee health care was the reason that our community was teetering on financial bankruptcy. We weren't alone. Many cities and counties across the country were in the same situation. It was largely the result of skyrocketing healthcare costs. And, you know, our city, probably like your city and many others, you may not get paid exorbitant wages to work for the city government, but historically the benefits have been pretty good, and they covered quite a bit. And that was the case in Duluth. When healthcare got really expensive, and especially the out-year costs of providing healthcare to retirees and their families was factored in, our municipal finances were teetering on bankruptcy. There was a long time in Duluth city government in which city employees and city retirees did not pay any co-pays for their employee health care. So part of the issue there. So we were dealing with a challenge, and like many parts of the upper Midwest, dealing with challenge and conflict in our region sometimes isn't the easiest thing that we have to do. So I'll tell you a little bit of a story. So I came to Duluth in 2003, 2004, in that region, in that time period, and I was familiar with the area. I've always been connected to that area, so I kind of thought I knew the culture and knew the culture of Minnesota. Our city council meetings in Duluth are Monday nights, and I was in the newsroom a couple times on Monday nights when scanner traffic, we had a police scanner like most newsrooms would, we heard police scanner traffic all the time, but the scanner traffic that night said they needed a police officer to come to the city council chambers to break up a fight. A fight was brewing because of concerns about this municipal bankruptcy issue and other matters that we had come to, you know, blows in the city council chambers. And I thought, wow, Garrison Keillor didn't tell me about this part of Minnesota where they actually come and fight at city council meetings on Monday night. But you know, he didn't say anything about it because it really isn't part of the culture, and it wasn't part of Duluth's culture. It was a reflection of how rough things had gotten in Duluth. And it wasn't the only time the police were called for. That was the worst time, but there was another time where it almost came to blows. So here we were in Duluth. We were fighting with each other instead of coming up with solutions. So one of the reasons the Community Foundation got involved was because all of this fighting was turning off a lot of people, longtime folks, newcomers. A lot of our young people in Duluth just kind of looked up at what was happening in city government in Duluth at the time and just said, I don't want to be any part of it. So young people, diverse members of our community, new arrivals were looking at this and saying, I don't want to be part of the circus. I don't want to get involved if this is what it means to be part of this community, to especially play a role like serving in the city council or coming and speaking before the city council. And that wasn't a good place for us to be as a local unit of government. It's not a good sign for any town if your young people and your new arrivals are kind of looking at themselves and saying, it's time to head for the exits. So entered the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation. We are a very classic community foundation. We exist as a nonprofit, a 501c3, to better the community in so many ways. Our portfolio runs from scholarship funds for our college students, high schoolers who are going off to college, to economic development work, to community beautification, nature preservation, arts and culture. One of the nice things about a community foundation is we can look out across the region and see what the needs are without regard to political or geographic boundaries, and say, here's something that we need to fix. And in the early 2000s, our civility level in Duluth was, particularly in Duluth, a little bit in Superior, but in Duluth was holding us back, and it was threatening our healthy future if people were questioning whether it was time to head for the exits. So the Community Foundation formed a task force. It involved young people, it involved community leaders, it involved some of those diverse community members that we talked about, it involved some public officials. The charge was figure out what's wrong. Why are we fighting with ourselves so much in Duluth? And let us know how to fix it. And the solution they came up with was Speak Your Piece, that little program, these lovely green cards that fits on the back of a business card, and it's 9 simple tenets. The program says, today I will, and that's an important part because I can't make you civil, you can't make me civil, but I can focus on the guy in the mirror here. Today I will pay attention, listen, be inclusive, not gossip, show respect, be agreeable. And sometimes we get questions about this one because people aren't sure what that means. Does that mean just nod your head and agree with everything? No, it doesn't. It means be open to compromise. So sometimes we say be open to compromise. Apologize if you need to apologize. We've worked with another group in Virginia. They've changed this one because apologies can sometimes be a little loaded language. So sometimes we talk about healing broken relationships instead of apologizing, but the same idea. The 8th one is give constructive criticism. So it's okay to criticize, but you need to be constructive when you do that. And then the final one is take responsibility. So 9 little tenets that fit on the back of a business card, stuff that we learned in kindergarten and 1st grade. And, you know, a lot of people like me looked at those 9 tenets and said, give me a break. How's that going to change the world? This is kind of remedial. It's kind of so basic as to be simplistic, and I can't imagine it would work. And I will tell you, as the editor of the local paper, I said it's not going to work. And I said it's going to be actually kind of interesting to watch it fail. And when I told the Community Foundation president that years later, she said, thanks a lot, Rob. We really appreciate that. But that's where my head was. And I tell you guys this because I really was a doubter. I didn't think this could work. And one of the objections that you'll hear if you guys decide to move forward with Speak Your Piece is exactly that. What's this? This is so simple. It's just never going to work. Come on. But I will tell you, the simplicity of the program is its strength. There are none of us, I would dare say, who don't want all of the 9 things that Speak Your Piece tells us we need to do. I mean, they're kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's the basic stuff. I want to be paid attention to. I want to be listened to. I want to be included. I don't want people to gossip about me. I mean, we could go up and down the list, and we all would probably say, yeah, I want those things. Of course I want those things. And therein is the power of Speak Your Piece. If we want them and we want to create environments that support these 9 tenets, we have to be part of the solution. We have to be ones who say, today I'm going to do these things. I'm going to show respect. I'm not going to gossip. I'm going to be open to compromise, heal broken relationships. And I guess I would tell you one other thing. The program was deliberately made simple. So it's great that we're having the conversation tonight, and I love bringing Speak Your Piece to you, but you won't need a ton of trained facilitation to bring it to your community. You just need probably a bunch of these cards and pass them out, and we talk about ways to make the environment civil. So it really is that power of civic engagement that makes Speak Your Piece so effective in accomplishing the goals, allowing communities to come together, find solutions, move forward, and then reform those groups when those old solutions no longer are working. And with the pace of change, we have to do that more and more and more. It's faster paced, and we have to be able to come together in a civil environment to have those conversations. Communities that do this are going to be able to succeed faster and get to places that other communities won't get to. Uncivil environments are going to look like Duluth did in 2003 and 2004, and that's people are going to say, I'm not sure I want to stay here. I'm not sure I want to get engaged. I'm not sure as a developer that I want to bring a project to that town because it's kind of crazy there. They fight at the city council meetings. So think about that bringing together of people as the power of this program, and it's the power of civic engagement. So what happened in Duluth? Well, it didn't happen overnight, but our community came together and we started working on our difficult issues, most importantly, the threat of municipal bankruptcy. So little on that municipal bankruptcy, since I'm talking to a group of city officials, we were not there yet, but we were using effectively a cash-based accounting system with our city government. And if we switched to a gap-based accounting system, the way we're supposed to do accounting, where you're recognizing expenses and items like that, long-term obligations as liabilities, that's where we got in trouble, or was close to getting in trouble. So we had to do some work in Duluth. Our finances were out of whack. What once worked was no longer working because healthcare had gotten so expensive, we couldn't do the kinds of things that we had done in the past. And we had to not only change that part of our city budget, but we had to change some other parts. But we certainly weren't able to do it if we were fighting at the city council meetings. So Speak Your Piece coincided with the election of a almost entirely new city council in Duluth. And some of those members of the city council had been involved in putting Speak Your Piece together. And so they, along with a new mayor named Don Ness, stepped into office and said, we're going to bring Speak Your Piece, this little green card, to the city of Duluth as part of the way we do operations. We're going to pass a model ordinance that says this is part of how we do deliberations at the city council and in city agencies. So new players came to the table, engaged with the new ideas of Speak Your Piece, and began to insist on a civil playing field. And it was amazing what happened. Sometimes I think you, as public officials, you wonder, well, if we model good behavior, will people follow along and will people listen? And I will tell you absolutely, at least in Duluth, Minnesota, that was our experience. People were following bad behavior when it was modeled, the incivility. When our new city council and our new mayor modeled good behavior through Speak Your Piece, people started following it, abiding by it, expressing feelings of relief and refreshment that we had a chance to work on some of these issues in a together environment that was more in keeping with our culture. So I'll tell you a little bit of a story. Slowly but surely, the city had to renegotiate 9 contracts with different unions representing different bargaining units at the city, and they did. And 1-year contracts for 0% raises, things like that happened. Stuff nobody was really happy about, but they were willing to come to the table and do it and find solutions because the playing field was civil. One of the decisions that Duluth had to make was they were about to close a bunch of community centers. Duluth, like many cities, is a community of smaller neighborhoods, and we had a number of neighborhood community centers that offered art and exercise and childcare and the kinds of things that community centers do. And the city said, look, we just can't afford to do this anymore. We can't run 10 community centers the way that we've always run them. We're going to unfortunately have to close them. Lo and behold, the YMCA came to the city council and said, you know, we think we can be part of the solution. We've been trying for years to get out of our big old downtown YMCA offices and headquarters into the neighborhoods. We just haven't found a good way to do it. We can't run 10 community centers, but maybe we can run 5 for you. And let's see if we can take this on. We're happy to do it. In fact, we'd be happy to do it without incurring any cost to the city. We just see it as that important. So we had a new player come to the table. The YMCA brought resources and ideas and people and money to solve a problem that would have otherwise been solved by the city closing these centers. My question to you guys is, do you think they would have come to the table if we were still fighting at the city council meeting? I can tell you almost certainly they wouldn't have. Nobody would have wanted to be part of that circus because it was that crazy. And as soon as the crazy died down, the circus left town, civility became the rule of the day, the YMCA was willing to play. And it didn't mean that there weren't difficult conversations. We were having conversations as we worked our way out of these financial problems. And they were sometimes difficult conversations. But as long as that it was a civil place to be, we were willing to work it in Duluth, and we've made tremendous progress in the past, many years now. I want to talk about a few other places that Speak Your Piece has worked, areas where we've had impact and had the opportunity to work with local communities. So one of them is Sisters Oregon. It's kind of central Oregon, not far from Bend, Oregon. And Sisters is known as a beautiful small community. It's known as the home of the world's largest outdoor quilting festival. You have to put the outdoor in there because apparently there's a larger indoor quilting festival, but it's the largest outdoor quilting festival. Beautiful place, high desert, low humidity, nice temperatures, small town, but Oregon's close to California, and there are a lot of people in California who over the last decade or 20 years or longer have been looking to leave California for a place that might be a little less crowded and a little less expensive. And Sisters Oregon was right in the pathway. So the challenge that Sisters Oregon was facing when they called us was rapid growth, a lot of change brought about by rapid population growth. And so when we were on the phone with the folks in Sisters, I asked them to tell me what was the biggest issue, what was causing the unrest, what was really creating incivility in Sisters Oregon. And they said, well, that big issue is they want to build a bike path through the woods. And I said, tell me more. I don't understand. How can a bike path through the woods be the lightning rod for all of the incivility in our community? And eventually I went out to Sisters and I understood what was happening. It was not just a bike path through the woods. This was a paved path through a national forest that historically had not had any development, had no paved surfaces. And so it wasn't about the bike path through the national forest. It was about change, that never before had there been a paved path through our pristine national forest. And it represented all of the change for many people that was happening in their town. They didn't feel like they knew their town anymore. What was a place that was friendly and familiar was looking very different. Real estate prices were increasing, traffic was increasing. They were talking about having to build more and grow the community, and that bothered the people of Sisters. And so we started working with the folks in Sisters, and a number of them were willing to work with us. Others didn't want to get engaged. And the question that came up with the group that was working with us was, okay, we get it. We want a civil environment. We're willing to do our part. We're willing to do what your little green card says, Rob. But as soon as we start doing that, the other side's just going to laugh at us. They're not going to come around. They're going to actually probably use the opportunity to mock us or to make things even more difficult. And, what do you say to that? What should we do? My response to them was do it anyway. That the power of civic engagement that comes from this little green card is so powerful. If you create an environment in which civility reigns, you're getting things done, you're having conversations, you're talking about solutions, it might not happen right away. It might not happen overnight, but slowly but surely, the community is going to gravitate to that. There's that power of civic engagement. We're trying in a civil way to work through issues, concerns, obstacles, and it might take a few weeks or months, but that other side will come to the table and start working with you. And that's exactly what happened. It turns out they had more in common than they had in opposition to each other. They both love sisters. Those newcomers who were part of the growth had come there because they loved what they saw in sisters. And they didn't want it to be ruined, but a community that was growing needed to change in some ways. It just couldn't be the same town that it had always been. So they came together, they had some difficult conversations. They have made more progress than any community we've worked with in the past 10 years. And I'm very proud to say that Sisters still looks a lot like it always did, but it's been able to embrace some issues like smart growth, development in some areas and not in other areas. The bike path eventually got built, and people were willing to recognize that it provided a little more access to the beautiful national forests that surround this community. So a compromise in that regard. They've talked about things like affordable housing to make sure that the people who work in Sisters can also live in Sisters. It doesn't mean they have to go, outside of town, that the community gets overpriced, but they've got more work to do. Development is not probably ever going to slow down or stop, but finding ways to work together to make it a peaceful community and to address these issues, they've definitely gotten to that spot in Sisters, Oregon. So I want to talk about another place, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. You are probably as familiar with Eau Claire as we are in Duluth, not far away from either of our communities. Eau Claire is a beautiful mid-sized town in northern Wisconsin, kind of northeast Wisconsin, not far from the Twin Cities, far enough to be a community of its own, but close enough to be able to go in and enjoy the cities and get back probably that same night if you want to. Eau Claire faced a challenge of downtown development, another development kind of an issue that we often face with Speak Your Piece. And this wasn't rapid population growth, but it was just the change of a community. It came from a good place. One of the amenities, or one of the benefits you have in living in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, is there's a branch of the University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire. The people at UW Eau Claire say it is the best nursing school in the UW system, and they're quite proud of the fact that they have a branch campus of the University of Wisconsin there. UW Eau Claire and the city and the county in Eau Claire County decided that they wanted to do something special downtown, and they built a performing arts and community center called the Confluence Center, right at the confluence of the two rivers that meet in downtown Eau Claire. And it still is a beautiful jewel in the downtown of Eau Claire, but it did more than just pop up and offer more attractions. It spawned offshoot development downtown, kind of a gentrification of downtown Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Some of that included tax increases to pay for street and parking deck improvements. And one of the most controversial aspects was they changed some two-way streets to one-way streets. And some of the longtime residents of Eau Claire and Eau Claire County said, we don't recognize our own town anymore. All of this change, it's happening so quickly. What was the matter with the town that we had before? Why did we need all this? And why do we have to pay more in our taxes to have this happen? Some of this went to a referendum, and the people in Eau Claire County voted 60% to 40% to fund the changes. So when they called up and said, hey, Rob, we have a problem, need some help, I asked, well, what's the problem? Your referendum passed with 60% of the voters. And some of the local officials said, well, that's great. We've won the day here, but this is just the first phase of development in our community. And we're going to need that other 40% to figure out what the next steps are, to make sure that they feel included, that this is still this is still their town, and they have a voice. So I was amazed that the city of Eau Claire, the county of Eau Claire, were able to use Speak Your Piece to bring that 40%. The ones who really they kind of lost. They'd lost the election, they'd lost the decision. but it was important for the whole city to at least try to bring them back into the fold. They didn't want to lose that 40% and have them just stalk off. It needed to be a solution that benefited more than just the winning 60%. And they've done a great job in subsequent years of bringing that 40% together and finding out what are the next steps. And if you've been to downtown Eau Claire, it's a beautiful place. They're continuing to make it a special place. Finally, I want to talk about a small community in Northwest Wisconsin, Madeline Island. It's in the Madeline Island, Bayfield, Ashland, Wisconsin area. It's a vacation place. It's a special vacation place for my family. And the issue that came up at Madeline Island was change that was brought about by drug and alcohol use. A few years ago, Madeline Island has always been a place for people to relax and have fun, but that relaxing and having fun had resulted in the deaths of 3 young men. 2 had gone through the ice on snowmobiles in the wintertime after spending a lot of time at a few bars on the island and trying to get back to the mainland on snowmobiles while intoxicated was dangerous and in this case fatal. Another man died of drug overdose. Another man died of a car accident after having been at the bars trying to walk home and was hit by a car. So they had been really ripped apart by 4 tragedies, 3 of them in a real close proximity. The other one had happened a little bit earlier, but there were people on the island who are wondering what has happened to our island. This is not the place that we're familiar with. We can't have more young people dying of drug and alcohol issues. And rightly or wrongly, the community kind of divided up on this issue. There was a group that I'll call the do-gooders who wanted to address the issue. And then there was the community's bar and restaurant businesses who felt that a finger of blame was being pointed at them. I will say that wasn't the intention, but I can see how they would feel that way, that a number of these incidents had happened with alcohol consumption on the island at their establishments, and they felt they were being blamed for this. And there we were on an island 14 miles long, 3 miles wide, with 2 camps looking at each other, arms folded, shaking their heads, saying, "I'm not going to work with you." This was one community where I wasn't sure Speak Your Piece was going to work. And part of the problem is like many small communities, everybody was related to each other, or at least many people were. And I thought that's going to be hard. We would hear things like this. People in the same families would be on both the opposite sides of this issue. And when we try to get them to sit down and talk together, they would say stuff like, "I don't need to sit down and talk with him. I know what he's going to say before he opens his mouth. He's my second cousin. He's my cousin. And I know what he's going to say before he opens his mouth." And his mother said the same thing 20 years ago. I mean, it's like, how can we possibly bring these people together? But we kept trying. We created a civil environment. We kept encouraging them to come together and work through difficult issues. It wasn't about being nice to each other. It was about being civil, but talking about difficult stuff. And slowly but surely, they came together. The trick that brought them together was really a way of thinking. We thought about drug and alcohol abuse not as who's to blame or who's done wrong here, but we thought about it as a public health issue. And we framed the issue in terms of a 10-year-old girl on a pink bicycle. And you're probably thinking, what in the world are you talking about? We were too for a little bit, but I'm not even sure how we found the 10-year-old girl on the pink bicycle, but she was the vehicle for us to come together. We said, do we want a 10-year-old girl on a pink bicycle to get hit by a drunken driver, somebody who's been sitting in the bar and had too much, and on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday evening driving home hits the 10-year-old girl on the pink bicycle? Well, of course, nobody wanted that to happen. No. And there we found agreement. We kind of backed up. We kept bringing, the circle of the issue further back. And when we reached a public health issue where the 10-year-old girl on the pink bicycle was at risk, we all found community. We all found agreement. And we could then move forward in ways to make sure that that 10-year-old girl and anybody else in town and anybody else who might have been sitting at the bar wouldn't get hurt in ways that others just had. And so out of that came a solution where the do-gooders and the bar and restaurant owners came together. The bar and restaurant owners said, look, there are things we know as an industry that we can do to help educate people about being overserved, not continuing to serve people who have been drinking, who need to stop. There's a long industry protocol for that, in fact. And every college town in America has some version of that in place. There are solutions we can be part of. The do-gooder said, let us be part of the solution. Let's start a tipsy taxi ride service where somebody will come and will just drive that person home if they need help, rather than have them try to get home themselves. And no questions asked, and then tomorrow we'll drive them back and they'll get their keys and everything will be okay. And we'll be the people who will do the driving. So coming together, solutions, difficult issues, people who wouldn't talk with each other suddenly were part of the solution. And I will say it's been almost 10 years, maybe more than 10 years at this point on Madeline Island. We have not had any more of those fatalities. I don't know that we can say that with certainty forever, but the environment is much healthier on the island because of Speak Your Piece. So why has Speak Your Piece worked in all of these diverse places, from municipal government issues and financial, ruin and bankruptcy issues in Duluth, to Sisters Oregon development issues, to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, a changing downtown and a changing community that nobody recognized, to drug and alcohol abuse on Madeline Island? Well, it's that civic engagement that I was talking about earlier, the power of civic engagement and bringing people together. Civility brings engagement. I'm willing to have a difficult conversation with you. I'm willing to ride the roller coaster with you if neither one of us is in danger of getting thrown out. If it's that dangerous, I don't know if I want to do it, but if you can say we'll have a difficult conversation in civil ways, I'm willing to come to the table. And most people are willing to come to the table. Engagement brings people together to solve problems. Engagement also brings new ideas and resources. So I have an idea, you have an idea, maybe they'd work, but together we might find even a better idea than individually we could come up with together. Why is civic engagement and bringing together people important? Well, New York Times columnist Tom Friedman is one of my favorites. He's a Minnesota guy. He's from St. Paul originally. And a few years ago, Tom wrote a column even before all of the changes that we've experienced recently. He said, we're in a new renaissance. And we think about the Renaissance, we think about a time of great advancement in science and art and culture. And it was all of that. But Friedman said, the Renaissance was kind of a period of dislocation for people too. It's exciting and there's amazing changes happening, but it's also a time when many people are feeling left behind, or they're worried about feeling left behind. So Friedman says, in this time when people are feeling that like that, we have to recognize that rapid change is not going to slow down. I mean, I don't think anybody is saying as soon as things slow down, we'll have time to make things better, or we'll finally be able to get together. And maybe we're saying that about COVID because we can actually gather in person, but I don't think anybody thinks that rapid change is going to slow down. It's the pace of change is going to increase, and we have to become better at adapting to the rapid pace of change. So Friedman says that civility is needed to bring people together, to constantly find new solutions when old solutions fail. Think about the solutions that our grandparents' generation dealt with. When somebody solved a problem, it usually was good for 10, 20, 30 years, maybe longer. These days, your latest innovation is, the shelf life on any innovation is a lot shorter than it used to be. And so that means we have to do more coming together and solving problems than our grandparents' generations did. What does this mean for you in the city of Willmar? Well, first, you're a community with the same opportunities and challenges of all of these communities that we've been talking about tonight. your ability to work together internally and with key external stakeholders is going to determine your success and shape your future in the city of Willmar. Like we've been saying, change is here and it's coming faster and stronger, and it's not going to slow down. So if you're able to harness that change in Willmar and you can use it for strategic advantage while avoiding some pitfalls, you're going to be further and better off than other communities that don't have these skills. That's why it's vital to do what we've done in Duluth, get some of this into your DNA and make sure that when we're having difficult conversations, civility and speak your piece are part of it. So communities and industries that have done this have thrived. Think about a technology company like Apple. So, you know, whether we like it or not, they come out with a new iPhone, every year? Sometimes it seems like even quicker than every year. They don't see change as a threat. They see change as an opportunity to innovate and create a new iPhone with even cooler features and make some money selling it. Change is an opportunity at a place like Apple. Communities and industries that don't see change in this way, they tend to suffer. Think about my old industry, the newspaper industry. We held on to the old for far too long, and now we're struggling to keep up in an information explosion world. So what next steps can you guys do in the city of Willmar to do more with Speak Your Piece? Well, I've got some suggestions. The first thing I would suggest is integrate Speak Your Piece into your operations, into your meetings, into your decision making, and into your city council deliberations in the city of Willmar, just like they did in Duluth. We also did this in Superior, and in many of the communities where we've been, it starts with the city council. You guys are the leaders. People look to you, and when you say, we're going to make civility part of the way we do business, it's going to be a hallmark of what happens here. When developers and others come to town and want to do business here, we're going to have a civil conversation in the city of Willmar. We have a model ordinance that we can share with you. We've got different communities that have done different things with that ordinance, but they all have passed the ordinance and said, you know, in a clear and definitive way, this is our statement about why civility matters. Secondly, I would recommend that you just work to harness the benefits of greater civility as you face new challenges and creatively seek opportunities to accomplish your goals. Realize that the power of civic engagement can do things like bring the YMCA to the table. It can bring the 40% together with the 60% to come to the table and figure out what are the next changes in Eau Claire or in your community. It can bring the restaurant and bar industry and the do-gooders together on Madeline Island. Civility is like the oil that keeps the machine of your city government running. It also can go a step further, and it can kind of turbocharge your city to new levels of achievement through the power of civic engagement. It takes what you have, it ensures that you're making the most of what you have, and it also does what I've been talking about, brings some new resources, new thinking, new minds, new money in some cases to the table through civic engagement. And I guess I would tell you there may be no better time to use Speak Your Piece than right now, when we're all feeling that incivility is raging. Everywhere we look, we see people fighting with each other. We're fighting with family members and close friends, people who've been part of our lives in ways that we just didn't in the past. If you can calm that down and show that there is a solution, and it's as simple as pay attention, listen, don't gossip, as simple as that sounds, it's actually, I think, refreshing and kind of a relief to your people, as it has been in our communities, that there is a solution and it's not real complex. So I also might suggest that you start with tenet number 2. Improve. We all need to do a better job of improving our listening skills. I think listening is a lost art in America these days. We're all so busy thinking about what's the thing we're going to say next, as opposed to really listening to the others on the other side. I've got some training videos that I'd like to share with you after we're done. Just things you can take a look at in your own time that fit with what we do and that we often use as part of our training. I'm also available to you, as is our community foundation, to help you with getting little cards and posters out there or figuring out what might be the next steps if you are interested in passing the model ordinance or taking other steps with civility. I would also suggest that getting your local media involved is an important part of it. That has been vital in all of the communities where we've worked. So I know a little bit about the West Central Tribune and Kelly, if he's still as the editor there. And I know you've got good folks there who I think would take up the mantle and support the civility effort. So thank you for listening to me. I'm happy to take some questions from you.
Rob, thank you for your presentation. Very thorough. I like your 4 examples that you gave, and I know I talk with Mayor Larson on a fairly regular basis on what's going on up in Duluth, and they've got a lot of good things happening. And I know through the COVID, they really had a lot of challenges, particularly in their healthcare fields, and they've really come through those very nicely. So, are there council members that have questions for Rob? And Vicki, if you can kind of lead that part, seeing that you brought this to the table, I can facilitate a bit, but I cannot see Councilmember Butterfield or Councilmember Osk. So if you could help with those 2, otherwise I think I can see everybody else. So anybody that has questions or comments for Rob?
On here. But I would like to say thank you to Rob for this presentation. Thank you for taking time out of your day to come and speak with us. Anyone else?
If I may. Yes.
Audrey?
Thank you. I am pleased with the presentation and hope that we will take steps to move forward with that. I think that this community looked to speak your piece once before. Community leaders worked together, and I think it was important then, but perhaps it's even more important now with the changes in the world and the changes in our community. There's a word that isn't on the form that I think is a word that we as a council and community need to work on, and that's trust. And I think trust and respect for each other, trust for and respect for our community, and being able to speak without feeling like you're in a corner and that it's necessary to try to push out. And I don't know if our presenter has any thoughts on the comments that I'm making, but I was struck yesterday, and I would like to just share this with you. The devotional book that I use called Be Brave. Yesterday, the title was Peace Work. And there's a paragraph in there that talks about it's the responsibility of all people to live in harmony and reconciliation with one another, not just with the people we like, but especially with the people we don't. Harmony isn't about everybody being the same. It's about everybody being different and getting along. Think of those people today who you find difficult to work alongside. Strive for reconciliation in those people and watch how it can work through you. And I also just have to share, I was part of that group. I don't remember what year it was, but I've carried this card in my wallet, and the Willmar Area Community Foundation, the United Way of Candiac County, and the Community Marketing Coalition, I think, spent the money to do these cards. The corner's worn out, but the words are still the same. And I hope that we as a council will look to see what we can do to move this forward and incorporate it into our daily lives. And but I am interested in that word trust.
Yeah, Rob, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I very much appreciate your thoughts, and it sounds like it's time to get you updated cards. Mine's a little dog-eared myself. Yeah, I mean, a big part of civility is people willing to, take that trusting first step and to find themselves back in community. And, for a long time, in many places, again, look around our country, it's a comfortable spot or an easy spot to be, to sit in separate camps, warring camps, and in some respects, it's all we've known for quite some time. So, really sit down with the other side? Are you kidding me? There's no way. I mean, why would I do that? Why would I do that? And the answer to why we all should do that and need to do that is this constant pace of change. We're going to get left behind if we can't, as a community or a group of communities, come together, constantly reform. And so it's not just about being nice and taking care and time to treat each other better. There's certainly benefit from that, but it goes beyond that. The benefits are greater than just the simple human benefits that we get when we do the right thing. Our community gets stronger. We're able to bring more resources to the table. I'll sit down with somebody I disagree with, and we'll get, instead of if I come up with A and that other person comes with B or C, we may get to, M, N, O, P, Q, R. We may get way down the road with a much better and durable solution than if we push through my solution or the other person's solution. And it's worth the investment to try. So I guess trusting that the other side is going to be civil. One of the things that this little card can do is it can say, well, here are the ground rules. Here are the ground rules. So, trust but verify. One of the things that City Council had to do in Duluth more than once, and they'd actually come back around to speak your piece recently after kind of a difficult issue came up, is they hold each other accountable and say, well, hold on a second, Councilmember Carwath, we've agreed that these are our ground rules. When I hear you say what you just said, I feel like you're not following that. So not being afraid to hold each other accountable and trusting that we've got a set of rules that we all agree on. So agreeing on, does anybody want to be gossiped about? Raise your hand. Nobody wants to be gossiped about. Does anybody not want to be apologized to if an apology is warranted? Okay, so we've got our 9 ground rules. You're going to hold me accountable. I'm going to hold you accountable. A little trust, but there's some trust but verify in there too.
Thank you. I hear, I hear support for moving this to the council agenda for Monday night. And so if our staff can work on, maybe work with Rob and Councilmember Davis to get the form put together and the council action request formulated so that we have something to act on Monday night, unless I'm seeing objection, which I'm not seeing at this point. That's the direction I'd like to see us go. So if there's objection to that, let me know. Rob, again, as Councilmember Davis has said, thank you for taking your evening to share your insights, your knowledge, your wisdom with us. And I look forward to implementing this in Willmar. As Councilmember Nelson had stated, we did attempt to do this a number of years ago, and I had brought it back earlier or later last fall, and then this just was the right time to bring it forward again. So thank you to Councilmember Davis for bringing this back to the front of the table. So thank you very much. Have a great evening. We have 2 other items on our agenda. You can stick around and watch how we do business, or we understand you have a family life as well. And if you want to get off to that, we do understand that.
I might go have dinner, but I want to keep working with you on this. So thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you very much. Yeah. Reach out to our city administrator and Councilmember Davis. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. Next on our agenda, we have the issue of, I got to get to that page here. Come on, computer. I apologize. Staff did prepare for me my handout, but I was unable to pick it up. So that's my fault. Next on the agenda is a conversation in regards to the committee structure. On this, again, I'll go to Councilmember Davis for an introduction.
I'll take off my mask so people can hear me better. I just wanted to bring this up again. I brought it up in December of 2019, but we now have new council members, and so I thought we should talk about it again. I still think we should get rid of committee structure, just for the fact that only half of us hear the information at committees, and the other half, I mean, I always try to either read the minutes or listen to the meetings, but that's not always possible. And then sometimes I read things in the paper before I've had a chance to do that. And I've been asked about things that were in the paper when I didn't know what was happening. And it just seems too like sometimes community development and labor don't meet. And so if we just had council meetings with the stuff we need to discuss, I think it would fit. And then we'd all hear the same thing, and the mayor would hear everything. All of us would have all of the same information. So that's part of how I feel about that.
Okay, we have we've discussed this numerous times. The original time that it was brought up to us would have been about the time that I was elected, and Councilmember Plowman was elected at that same time. And it was one of the issues that was being talked about during the campaign cycle. And so this has been something that's been on our table for quite some time. I know that there was some frustration at our last council meeting when there were comments made that, we had a 2-hour presentation on this, but then we're being asked to make a decision in 5 minutes on something with minimal discussion. And so there was just some uneasiness. And so when Councilmember Davis had brought this to me, I said, well, we can put it on the agenda for tonight because we're having a work session. If we choose to talk about it again, that's fine. If we don't want to talk about it again, that's fine as well. So is there dialogue that people would wish to have in regards to this? And again, I'm unable to see Councilmember Osk and Councilmember Butterfield. So if they're raising their hand, if someone could let me know that. Oh, I see Councilmember Butterfield now.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
I just want, I'm questioning why right now. I was a supporter of work sessions when we switched from the committee structure to work sessions. However, they didn't work. We ended up going back to the committee structure, and I'm not opposed to looking at a different structure. However, to just say let's go away from committees without having a different structure, I think is setting us up for failure also. And I think if you listen to the committees, if people listen to the dialogue at the committees, I think the discussion there is good, and I think it speaks back to what we just talked about trust and respect also for information and with that. And so I'm not opposed to looking at something different. I just feel like our plate is full right now, and I guess this feels like it's more in depth than just a yes or no conversation at a work session.
Thank you for those comments. Is there anybody else that wishes to make some comments? Councilmember O'Brien.
The committee structure is okay. However, when you bring it back verbally, almost word for word to the council, not only are you wasting your time, but you're confusing. So I think it's very important, like when we're in a committee, we get the very points that we want to make and we bring them. But I think as a council person, our responsibility is to read the minutes that have been posted. I mean, I've been on a lot of boards and we do it with very minimal, what I call committee structure. And that is because they do such a good job of following through what they should be doing, and that's reading the minutes that have been posted. When those minutes are posted, we should be reading them, and then the person in that committee, or that chair committee, can bring up the fine points We don't have to go through the entire thing like we've been doing. And I think that's, for me, that's a key is we don't need to completely go through word by word or sentence by sentence what you heard in a committee. Committees can be very important. Committees can be very useful, but they can also be very derogatory. I mean, you can listen and pretty soon you stop listening. When you read like you're supposed to, you should be reading those minutes before you get to the council. And if you have any questions, I would really strongly encourage you to talk to your chairperson of that committee and find out what those issues are before the committee meets. And then if you think it needs to be discussed through the entire committee, then do so. But if it doesn't, if you between the two of you, you can get it done, do it. I think that's the key. The key is to follow through, do what you're supposed to do, read the minutes before you get to the meeting. And then if you have any questions, talk to the chairperson of that committee. And they may say, yeah, you know what, we should probably bring this to the whole committee, or we can settle this between us. That's how I look at it. That's how I've always done it. And otherwise, these meetings get to be way too long, and they get to be very confusing after a while.
Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly appreciate the comments that have been made thus far, and I believe that a strong case can be made in both directions, both in favor of committee work and against committee work, or more so in favor of the work structure, the work session structure. Having participated in both, I've seen the good and the bad of each. I've seen it when it works well, and I've seen it when it's not worked so well. My position on the issue currently is I still favor the committee structure, even though it involves more personal time and it involves more personal responsibility. Personal time in attending those meetings and participating and taking part in those meetings, but then also responsibility, as Mr. O'Brien alluded to, in doing the research and reading the minutes and trying to gather the information that has taken place for the activities and the discussion that's taken place in the other committees. I think committees are an efficient way to break out and to delegate different task making and different authorities and different things that need to be done that are beyond the purview or beyond the ability of the entire council to do. But I certainly respect Councilwoman Davis's remarks with regards to that being sometimes very difficult to do, and it being a difficult process for all of the council members to obtain all the necessary information for decision making. Where I currently stand with regards to that is in remembering the first time that we switched from the committee structure to the work session structure, I personally felt as though too much information was coming before the council at once, and I don't believe that we found the right way, and I don't believe it was anybody's fault. It wasn't the fault or the error of anybody. I just don't believe we found the right method to conduct those work session meetings, whereas we were all hearing the correct amount of information and getting all of those details necessary to make the essential decisions. I felt like when decision-making time came, not enough of us had decision-making. We weren't in the right mind space to be making those decisions because we didn't have the amount of time to absorb the necessary information. So that was the reason that I personally supported going back to the committee structure. It wasn't such that I'm against a work session model. It was just that I felt more comfortable with the information being given at the committee level. Is there a more efficient way of doing things? I believe so. I believe work sessions could hypothetically be more efficient. I believe that there is some model out there that could be more efficient and more effective. But for the time being, I still feel as though the information is being gathered and delivered more completely and more thoroughly to the entire council as what it was when the work sessions, our last attempt at work sessions, was made. Now, if a new model for work sessions was to be proposed and brought forward, I am certainly open-minded into hearing what that model might be and hearing exactly how we believe that model, how we can use that model to everybody gather the correct information in an efficient and reasonable amount of time so that we can all make wise decisions together. I'm open to hearing that, and I'm open-minded to changing my stance on the issue, which, as I've noted myself, I've been supportive of committees, but I would be willing to openly have the dialogue again. And if it sounds as though we can put a model together to whereas we're all getting enough information that we can easily and efficiently and effectively make these decisions, I'm open to having that conversation. I don't think we have enough information at this time. I'd like to actually hear a proposed model, or see some bullet items, just how this would be done. But I'm willing to entertain the idea. And thank you for bringing it up. I think it's always a good time to discuss these things. And like I said, I can certainly appreciate the pros and the cons that others have mentioned, and I have respect for both sides of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments in regards to that. I think one of the, my opinion is that I think when we changed, I think after our second or third meeting this year, on how we presented our materials at the council and allowed some of those things just to go through on consent, I think that really has allowed us the opportunity to have a more in-depth conversation about some things that really put meat on the bone. I think that, and I use this example often, so I'll continue using it. Approving buying a fire truck or buying a squad car probably shouldn't be talked about a lot because it's already been reviewed 107 times. Well, literally only 7 times, but it's been reviewed a number of times and it should have been caught at a different level. So I think there's ways that our administrator could move that forward. In our city charter, the administrator has a lot of latitude to do some of the things. And I think we got bogged down a bit in our work sessions of going through the monotony. So I think that if we were going to put a model together, I agree with what's being stated. We would want to see what that would look like and then talk about that. But I would not speak in favor of a work session / city council process. I would speak more in favor of a city council process. Additional comments? I have not seen any of their hands up, so I'm looking here.
Mr.
Councilmember
Mayor?
Osmus. Councilmember
Yeah,
Osmus.
and then after her, Councilmember Osmus, and then Councilmember Osk after that.
Councilmember Osk after that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I like the thought of all 8 being able to hear the information. I do appreciate that. There has to be a reason that the last 4 city administrators said that they wanted us to do away with the committee structure. So that tells me there has to be a better way to do business. And again, when we tried it with the work session before the city council meetings, there was times I didn't feel like there was enough time. There was times that I didn't feel like we got enough information. Before COVID, when we had the smaller sessions or the smaller groups at the city offices, I did like the smaller, intimate setting. It seemed like it was easier to have a dialogue and to ask questions and to exchange information. But I still go back to it would be nice if all 8 could hear that same information and that same discussion. So I would like to see some examples of how other cities do it. And again, if the majority of other cities don't have committee structure, how do they do it? Are they all doing it one way? Is there a variety of different ways that they do it? That's what I would like. I don't know, so I'd like to hear how other cities do it.
Thank you.
Mr. Graham has his.
Mr. Grammons would like to speak as well.
Councilmember Osk.
Actually, I was planning to ask Administrator Gramitz if he could share some stories, because kind of like Councilmember Osmus was saying, I've heard that so many city administrators here and in other communities would prefer not to have that committee structure. I mean, could you quickly give us an example of what you've worked with in the past that's been helpful?
Yeah, Mayor and City Council members, the question about work sessions and committees and my discussions with council members, the mayor and staff have all kind of revolved around like, what do other cities do? And I just probably about 2-3 weeks ago, I sent out a little survey and said, tell me what your communities are doing, because the committee structure is coming to Willmar was new to me. I mean, I had never had committee structure before, nor work sessions, to be quite honest, except for a particular topic that you would get together and say, let's talk about this particular one item, like once a year kind of a thing. So I asked St. Cloud, what do you do? And I said, St. Cloud's a much larger community than Willmar. It's got suburbs. It's much more complex. And the agenda review occurs the Wednesday prior to a council meeting. Department heads present agenda items to the mayor and administrator for review and approval to move on to the city council meeting. There's no committee structure. There's no work sessions. There's nothing. Worthington, department head, staff prepare the agenda, send out to city council. My prior employer, Noam, does the same thing. Department heads put the agenda together, goes to the city manager, sets the agenda, sends it out to the council. That does not mean that a council member can't ask for an item to be placed on there. It's just that no one gets the information in the agenda except when everybody gets the information. And Waite Park, everything goes through the city administrator. Fairmont, everything goes through the city administrator. Austin, everybody goes through the city administrator. Morris, come on, move here. Morris, they have the same thing we have. All of our other boards and commissions with liaisons on those particular boards and commissions, but the agenda comes, to staff, prepares it, and it goes out to the full city council at one time. Mankato, the same thing. It all goes to the city manager's office and gets sent out to the city council at one time. Marshall is the only community that was surveyed in our, general area, rural population size, that basically says they have equipment, public improvement, transportation, legislative personnel, as well as all the other, planning commission, park and rec, and all the others. So Marshall is probably the closest to Willmar as far as having other committees that the city council is on that reviews things before it gets to the full city council. But I did not, other than Marshall, I did not find anybody in just a quick review. Some communities did not send information back, and I can't force them to do that, but those that did, this is just a recap. Administration puts it all together, sends it out to the council in agenda format. The city council all sees it at the same time. They read their information, they prepare for the city council meeting, make their discussion and decision. The one thing that I would point out, as City Council Member Nelson mentioned, that this process, what I call the majority process, which, is in the state of Minnesota. It's the same process I've seen in Wisconsin and also Iowa. But the majority process that administration puts the agenda together and sends it out to the council all at once also requires not just the trust that Councilor Nelson was talking about between council members, but it also requires that your department heads know what they're doing, put all the information down, and have a sound basis for making their recommendation to you. Okay? And so there needs to be the trust of the elected official that their staff is on top of the issues. I mean, do you let's say trust finance or public works or whatever, park and rec? Do you trust them enough to do the work necessary so you can make the decision in a council meeting? And so it's not just council trust, it's also council trust with the department staff and also, vice versa. Well, it's all, we're all in this together. And so that's one thing I think that I've seen in other communities was that, when the city engineer walked up and said, here's my item, they didn't spend 45 minutes talking about, is that a round culvert or an oval culvert? How deep is the pipe? They just said, you're the engineer, I trust you. Let's either do the project or don't, kind of a thing. So what I sense here in Willmar is that there's the council members like to get involved in the details and really know the ins and outs of everything. And that's quite honestly, that's pretty rare in most communities, because you're policy setters. You're not how deep the ditch should be dug kind of people. Do you care what shade of red the fire truck is? No, probably not. You're interested in providing the service. So when I arrived here, I'm kind of going like, boy, these committees really get into, sometimes the nitty gritty of those decisions. So I guess I would just say, it's more likely that you have a city in Minnesota that just has their staff prepare the agenda. Potentially the mayor, would look at it, before it gets sent out, but none of the council would even see the issue until they received it 3 days before the council meeting. And I just throw that out there to answer Councilmember Osmus's question.
I think that's an important thing that you just brought up, Brian, and that is that, this trust is not simply between the council members, but it also is between the staff members. It's between our community. It's between our civic partners, and it's between our citizenry. When we heard the presentation earlier, we were told that, the community looks to the council as the experts. And there is some degree of trust that needs to happen at all levels. Now, if we take a look over the last month, not only are we losing our city administrator, but we're also losing a number of our key department directors. And if we take a look over the last 6 years since I've been mayor, I wouldn't even want to start counting how many staff members we've lost at an executive level, in addition to council, in addition to our city administrator. These may all hinge around this issue that Councilmember Nelson brought up of trust. And a person doesn't want to work someplace where, they're being second guessed on everything they do all the time. There's nothing wrong with asking a question, but, I know Councilmember Davis had reached out to me and said, Mr. Mayor, what's the name of some cities that you've watched the council meetings at? And so I know that she's watched a number of other council meetings just to see how they function. And, maybe that's maybe the opening comments and the first subject that we had this evening is really the crux of what we're talking about. And that's what Councilmember Nelson brought up is, you know, are we making Willmar, as a lot of us want, the best place to work in the state of Minnesota? You know, I have interactions with other cities, and boy, I tell you, I talk to the police chief or the fire chief or the public works director or the finance director or HR, and man, I just hear nothing but, man, I just love working for this city and blah, 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 blah. But I'm going to be blunt with you guys. When I walk into City Hall, I don't hear that. And so something needs to change. And I think hitting the nail on the head probably was the trust issue. Additional comments from council. Councilmember Davis again.
I just want to say that when I ran for council, I had a past city administrator congratulate me. And when I asked them if they had advice for me, what they said was, look at big picture policy and stay out of the weeds. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about right now.
Councilmember Nelson.
I just wanted to ask Mr. Grant clarification. I know I've had some people talk about our structure and being a charter city. And we looked, before we went to the work session, I studied lots of organizational charts and lots of ways that committee or different cities function. But I think if we go back to our charter and look at our charter and the difference between a city administrator and a city manager, I think some of that also needs to be looked at in how we do things. I think the other thing that's become apparent when we're looking at our projects too is a lot of what we do is budget driven, and a lot of what we do is when we make a decision about the budget, did we make a decision about the budget, or did we just put it in the budget to be decided later? And I think for me, that's how I learned it from starting on the council, was that the budget was a guideline, but we weren't actually approving it until we approved it. So if there's a different method that needs to be looked at with, yes, we put it in the budget and yes, we plan to do it, we don't have to do it a second time kind of thing. But I don't see that I think we've got some steps to get there. But I think my real question is to look at other cities. Are they like us? Do they have the same form of government? Do they have the same structure for city administrator, city manager? And I think maybe there's some work there that needs to be done with how we operate before we just make a decision to go to something different too.
I think those are good points. I think if you take a look at our charter, we actually empower the city administrator to do much more than most cities do under a city administrator form of government. And I think these are all obstacles that can be overcome. Councilmember O'Brien.
I've mentioned before, and I've talked to directors personally, and I've really told them that I trust them. I really want the information that they're the professionals. We pay them to do their jobs. And these professional people that we have doing the jobs for our community, the trust is huge. I mean, I was in the military and I was also in law enforcement. Let me tell you, if you didn't have trust in your partners, you are in big trouble. And I mean big trouble. But when I see the professionalism that we have here, and I just kind of shake my head because it seems like we're always trying to second guess. And I really respect these people. I've known them for a long time, some of these directors. A lot of them are gone already, but I really appreciate the work they do. I really appreciate the professionalism they have, the ability they have. And I just wish that what we're talking about is we would give them the opportunity to do their job and not second guess them and not micromanage.
Councilmember Osk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's a lot of carryover from the previous conversation, looking at those 9 things, talking about being inclusive. I'm concerned about, conversations taking place with 4 of us that the other 4 aren't a part of. I think that all committees aren't created equal. 2 of our committees seem to have a lot more work on their hands than the other 2. And the other thing, on that list too is listening. I think I look back at the last time we met, we had the rec center in front of us, and we spent a lot of time talking about the rec center. That presentation, that was nothing new for me. I heard the entire thing at Public Works. And I didn't have a whole lot to say about it because I shared all those comments at Public Works. There were questions that people asked that I could have answered. I think Councilwoman Osmus actually answered a question from Councilmember Butterfield because she already had the information. She'd already heard it at Public Works. But I think we're missing out is that communication. It's not so much about gathering the information, but the communication that takes place in the dialogue. We're better if we can all have all 9 of us around that issue, hearing the information for the first time, having those questions and answers, and hearing what those other questions might be. So I don't know. I don't have the history that some of you do hear about what worked and what didn't work in the past, but I sure think that there's got to be a better model to it than the 4 committee structure that we have at the moment.
Additional comments or questions? So what I'm hearing being said, and if there's not consensus in this, somebody please let me know. But what I'm hearing being said is that we would like the administrator to bring back how he feels we could bring a different type of structure to move our processes forward so everybody heard everything at the same time. Doesn't mean that that's the direction we're going, but giving us something, because what I'm hearing is we want more information. We're interested in hearing what other people are doing. We're willing to explore. Those are some key words that I heard. I think one of the things that was said in the first group, and some of the council members that sit closer to me, I used to have it posted on my computer at the council meetings. Listen to understand versus listen to respond. So what I have been actively trying to do over the last couple of years is listening to what's being said by the other party to understand their point of view versus listening to them to respond back to what they've just said. And it really has changed the way that I have tried to conduct the meetings. I've tried to conduct them in a more professional manner using that format. And that was shared with me by a friend that had watched one of our meetings. And he had just told me, he said, Marv, you need to listen to understand versus listen to respond. And so I think that was good advice. I am certainly willing to do what the administrator said, and I have no problem not reviewing the agenda before it gets to the rest of you. I basically review the agenda, but I don't review the attachments. I only get the agenda page. And if I have a question about something that's on the agenda, which is very seldom, then the administrator will fill me in on it. Otherwise, I get the pack at the same time the rest of you get it. It didn't used to be that way, but in trying to, because there were some council members that had concerns that the mayor was getting information ahead of time. And so what I've told the administrator is don't give me the information ahead of time, just give it to me at the same time so that people can't say that I've got the inside information, if you will. So additional comments on this subject? Okay, we're willing to move to the last item on our agenda, and that is the City Hall Community Center and local option sales tax projects discussions. Councilmember Davis.
Oh, I thought you were taking this over.
Oh, I can take this one. That's fine. Did you want me to take this one? I know we talked about both ways, so. I had asked this to be on the agenda after speaking with Councilmember Davis in regards to this. I feel quite strongly, and I know that finance is working on this, and I appreciate the work they're doing, so I'm not asking for us to make a decision on this. But I feel quite strongly that we as a council need to be focused on a can-do attitude on the City Hall and Community Center versus a how can we put roadblocks in the way to make sure it doesn't happen. And I believe quite strongly that we, as our first presenter today talked about people wanting to invest in our community. You know, I see Willmar 10 as being a group that wants to invest in our community and make our community stronger and better. And they're bringing an option to us, similar to what the YMCA did up in Duluth. And they're saying, you can look at this, you don't have to do it, but, you know, can we partner this way? If we choose to go in a different direction, and I had an email from Willmar 10 just today, and I said, I'm looking forward to moving the direction that the council wishes us to move. I believe that a number of you received packets and had conversations within the last couple of weeks from the Willmar 10 investment group as well. The other thing that dovetails right into that is the Civic Center project. And I personally feel that the Civic Center project has missed the scope. They've done a lot of work. They've done a lot of really good work. And I think that the way it looks to the mayor, and this is just one of 8 people, but the way, one of 9 people, the way it looks to me is that we're getting 2 additional gymnasiums, and we're getting some office space. And I don't think that that was the intent of the question when the question was prepared and the question was presented. I also feel very strongly that this was one item that didn't have a lot of clarity on what it should look like at the end of the day. And so my proposal would be that we put energy towards the City Hall Community Center project, and we look at putting the event center on hold, possibly until we can get some clarification and we can move that forward. So I would like to put that out on the table and see if the council has any willingness to discuss that. And I'm willing to go whichever way the council wishes to go. I understand we have to wait until we hear back from finance on their due diligence, and that we're hoping to have by the end of April. So I'll start with Councilmember Nelson, followed by Councilmember O'Brien, followed by Councilmember Fagerly, and then Butterfield.
I didn't raise my hand, but I will speak.
Oh, I thought I saw your hand raised up. I apologize.
That's fine, but I think the community needs to understand that these are separate items. We can't use the local option sales tax money to build City Hall. And coming up with funds to build City Hall is what we've asked finance to come back with. So some of the emails we're getting are, you know, don't do this, do this. Well, the community voted to support local option sales tax projects, and that's where those dollars have to be spent. It is safe to say that if you look at what was on the flyer versus what is happening, Robbins Island is probably the only one that comes close to doing what they said they were going to do. The baseballs are not going to be able to do the things they're going to do or wanted to do. The event center and the field. But for me right now, it comes back to what can we afford to do. We're going to raise taxes. If we do the event center, the fields, we're going to have to raise taxes to cover the maintenance. If we do City Hall, even if we use some of the cash, we're still going to have to raise taxes. And for me, that's a question that I don't know where our community is at. If we weren't in the middle of a pandemic and weren't in the middle of lots of different things right now, life would be easy to just say, yes, do it. But I really feel a responsibility to look at the finances and let the finances help us make a decision. Can we do this now? There's lots of planning that needs to be done to exist in a new city hall? When we went on tours, are our staff ready to exist in a new city hall? I think there are things that we can be doing to move in that direction and commit to doing a new city hall. I just don't know that it is right now. And I'll stop with that.
Councilmember O'Brien, followed by Fagerly, and then Butterfield.
What I've done is I've talked to a lot of people, senior citizens, not senior citizens. I've talked to people who live in the areas and different parts of Willmar. What I've heard loud and clear about the city hall is, and the civic center is, the civic center needs to be, and this is, I've heard this so many times, and I heard it again today at the coffee time, is the seniors want that downtown. They want it at the mall. Now, I'm not saying seniors in general, but I'm saying a number of them have expressed an interest in the safety aspect of that highway. They've been, and I've talked to people who work in the civic center, and they've also, or community center, and they've also told me they've seen accidents that happen very, very close, screeching tires when the seniors pull out on Highway 71. For me, you're talking about, are we going to do downtown, or are we going to do a present area? I'm all for the downtown. I'm all for the mall. Can we afford it? Well, you know what? We have a person that's there in finance, and I wish we could have given him the ball a long time ago and said, hey, how can we do this? We do this with money. How do we afford to do this? I know that the whole city hall situation has been way before my coming onto this, and I've been hearing about it way before I was even in Willmar. They wanted a new place for their people, for the people to do their job. You can say we want to put it off. We can't keep putting it off. We need to talk to our finance people. We need to get a yes or no. And I think we need to get the job done. I mean, I've never seen such a, let's maybe do this or maybe do that. And I mean, it seems like that's all we do. And I think it's time to start to be proactive. And I think the people need to see that we can be proactive. And funding, let's get with our director of funding, our director of finance. That's what he's there for. Can we do this? And let's get it done. One way or the other, let's get it done. If we can't afford the other things, we can't afford the other things. But those two things that we're talking about, the city hall and the community center, to me, those are the two top things right there. That's for our people, and that's been on the agenda for quite some time. And I'm just saying, I think it's time that we just quit putting things off, find out what we can or can't do, and let's do it or not. But I say we go ahead with it. I've talked to a lot of people, and they really want us to either, to do it or not. But they really want us to be proactive and quit stalling. And that's what they call us, stallers. And I'm tired of that name. Why do you keep stalling? Why do you keep changing your minds? Let's be proactive. Let's do it or not, one or the other. But let's get with the people like we talked about, our director of finance. Let's get him on board, and let's find out if we can afford this. Can we do this once and for all?
Councilmember Fagerly, followed by Butterfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Julie was there and Councilmember O'Brien, we were at the community center this morning for Ron McAdam's day. Retta did an excellent job of setting it up, and it was well organized and attended. And I did a little survey myself, and the majority of the people wanted City Hall and Community Center at the mall, more for safety. And I was told there's 150 members, and about half are in town and half are out of town. So
But I think if we do proceed with the community center, we probably should look at the CenterPoint gas franchise fee now, since the municipal utilities has closed down their hot water heat. So hopefully that may help pay for the building, and then once the building is paid for, that franchise fee should go into a separate account just to help maintain all the buildings that the city owns. As for the Civic Center, I think I made a motion a few meetings ago to put everything on hold so we could get organized. Now, when I was on vacation, I came back and then I had phone calls about the athletic field. There's going to be 4 softball fields with fences, 210 feet. We don't even have a fast pitch softball league for girls. And you're going to put 4 fields out there, and what we need is baseball fields, and the fences need to be at least 250, 260 just for the youth. Sunrise Park, it's 300, and that's where 7th and 8th graders play. So I don't know what's going on, but it's not right in my mind. So
I just want to let the rest of the council know that I was unable to attend the event today for Ron, and so Councilmember Fagerly did attend that for me and read a proclamation that that was prepared by staff last week. So thank you for doing that, Councilmember Fagerly. Councilmember Butterfield.
Well, I've received quite a bit, number of emails, phone calls regarding all this sales tax stuff. My first thing was I reached out to our city administrator for information on this, and he sent me off, or actually forwarded the emails to all of us on council on how it was worded for passing this sales tax. I then reached out to Councilmember Nelson to see if she had any insight, since I knew she was on council when this all got passed. She couldn't know everything about it, but she did fill me in quite a bit. And then I finally reached out to Matt Dawson. I had a nice talk with Matt Dawson about how all the stuff was getting put out to bid and moving forward to matching up on how it was marketed for. He dropped off packets to everybody after me and him has had 2-3 days talking on the phone about all the stuff. I am just flabbergasted that these committees are putting stuff together that are not even on the way it was marketed for. There's nowhere I see for all basketball courts out there at the rec center. There's supposed to be a sheet of ice out at the rec center from all this. I don't know what how we can even proceed to move forward with this until we get the facts straight, because if we don't build it the way it was marketed for, City of Willmar is never going to get another sales option again. There are so many people upset with this. I've talked, and Matt Dawson put together a good pamphlet for us to review before we make any further decisions. I'm along with Rick. I say we put everything on hold except for Robbins Island and Swanson Field till we can get everything inspected and in line on how this was sold to the public.
Additional comments or questions? Councilmember Davis.
This is why I wanted to have this discussion tonight, because I feel like we're getting somewhere in talking about City Hall and the community center and just what's important to us right now. And, you know, I've heard the same thing about the event center. And while I was that liaison for that committee, it was real hard to get everything on that for $10 million. That's not enough money for what was wanted. And so the group tried their hardest to get everything that they could. But I think we should wait on those things too. I think until we know for sure what we want there, and I don't think we do right now. And so, and it just seemed like if we were going to build those and we're going to need to raise taxes to run those things, then we couldn't really do City Hall in my mind. That's just the way I saw it. So I don't know. I guess I'm happy to put those on hold while we consider City Hall. And I also agree with Mr. O'Brien that we can't just keep kicking it down the road. We need to do something, either yes or no, as far as City Hall.
Additional comments? Okay, Councilmember Plowman, followed by Councilmember Osmus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a very short, quick observation, and it's not going to throw anybody under the bus or anything like that, but it's just an observation in listening to the entirety of the dialogue. And I kind of find us sitting in a juxtaposition, because on one hand, we talk about the idea of leadership and leading a community, leading a city, and trusting staff and creating a mechanism in which we need to focus on policy, overarching policy, and not zoom in on the details. And yet here we are having conversations specifically regarding details within certain projects. I find that interesting. And I think it's something we're thinking about a little bit more in depth. Thanks.
Councilmember Osmus.
Thank you. I'm going to be a broken record. And again, I still think we have the opportunity to go back to the legislature to extend the 13 years that we had on the local option sales tax, to give us the opportunity to hopefully have the funds to go ahead with the event center. As far as, I'll back it up to the City Hall and the community center, I definitely think we need to go ahead with that. And as I stated at the last city council meeting, there's a way we can make that work. I truly believe that. And I think we can move forward with that. As far as putting everything else on hold, I still think we can go ahead with the turf fields. I don't see any reason to stop that process. As far as Councilmember Fagerly brings up about the need for the softball fields, before I would want to hear from the public, the recreation director, of what is in place and why and how we're going to use that facility before we say that there's not a use for it. I would want to hear that, how they would use it, and that it's necessary. I mean, there's a part of me that says I can't believe they would plan for these 4 fields if there wasn't a need for it, and it was in the local option sales tax. So I don't want to put everything on hold. I do think there's a purpose and a need for the turf fields, and then I'd want to hear some more about the softball field.
Additional council members, and I don't know if I'm missing anybody. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor Calvin. It feels like we need to go back to the beginning of the meeting when we start talking about local option sales tax. We put a committee structure together. The council has been receiving minutes and information in a variety of ways regarding this. We told the committees to bring the project forward. I don't know. I'm struggling with it. We have put the projects out for bids. I'm assuming we probably are at the point to get the bids back with that. And so remembering that this is money that's entrusted to us through the sales tax, and it's our job to do these. So to stop and say we're not going to do them, we've spent a lot of money on design and architects and doing some things. And I hear concerns about the fields and the costs, and that's a school project and the event center. And I've also heard that the event center probably creates more opportunities to market it than the fields do. But if we haven't even seen the current baseball design, I don't think it is anywhere close to what's on the sheet either. The reality is that with costs going the way they did, we can't do the things the way the projects were put on paper. Will it be any better next year? I'm not hearing anyone think that steel prices are going down or concrete prices are going down. If we're going to do these, I think we need to make sure we're making wise decisions. As for City Hall and let's not wait, let's do those things, I think Mr. Graham has put together an excellent document. It was presented to Finance. Finance wanted the full council to hear that detail. Mr. Okens is working right now on the request that came from the council meeting and is working on that to be able to present that in April. And I think that we need to look at those things before we make the decision. I think we need to look at the bids on our projects that we have put out there to see what we need to do. So are we ready to make a decision? I think we've got information out there that we've entrusted. I think we need to get back that information and find out, what do they look like? Is this the right time to do it, or is it not? It's a good conversation to have about prioritizations, but there were prioritizations made. Are we following through with that? That's, I think, for this council to decide. And yes, Mr. Okens can put the information together, but it is the 8 and 9 of us that have to make the decision of, are we spending the dollars and are we raising taxes? And so we can look at proposals, but the decision rests with the people at this table. And my goal has been to make sure that the people at this table understand what those numbers mean, that we get them clearly, and that's what we've asked for, and I think we will get that. So I hear what you're saying, but I think we've got a lot of things we should be looking at before we make a decision.
Councilmember O'Brien.
I haven't been able to quite figure out how we get the numbers we get. Well, 8 million, or maybe 10 million, or maybe 7 million. The way I've always done it with different organizations is, we get an architect, he comes in, he makes the plans, he meets with the people, he tells them, the architect finds out exactly how it wants to be laid out. They get all that information. Then they go out and get bids. We don't do that. We go out and get bids, solid bids. So you get 5 people bidding on a project, and then you look at that and you say, okay, well, this is the best. It may be the best dollars, but it may not be the best person. So we send people out that had worked with those individuals to make sure that they were trustworthy. Just because they're lower doesn't mean they're best. So we went out and searched. Okay, when we came back, then we picked out, we had a bid. We knew exactly how much we were going to spend. Not this 8 million, 10 million, 12 million stuff. That doesn't tell me nothing. I want to know from a bidder how much it's going to cost and exactly what it is that we're bidding on. So I think that's one of the things we don't do. But I'd really like to see us get more exact, get the bids out, find out exactly how much dollars we need, and have the people who need this information meet with the architects and get it laid out. So we know exactly that this is, like you're talking about, 2 basketball courts, they weren't supposed to be there. Well, if you would have had bids and you would have had the architects meet with these people, you wouldn't have had that situation. So we need to get out, we need to get firm bids. None of this 8 million, 10 million, 6 million stuff, because right now with the cost of wood, the cost of concrete, believe me, those prices are not, we better start adjusting them really soon. But we need to get some bids, some solid bids, so we know what we're doing and we know what we're spending.
Mayor Calvin.
Councilmember Butterfield.
Well, regarding this Civic Center, I would like to know how often we have events plugged out there all year round when there's no ice on the floor. If we have no time left on the table to book anymore, yeah, then we definitely need to do something about this event center. But if we're going months and months without events out there when there's no ice on the floor, I don't see why we need to move forward right now with the event center. Let's give them some time to get some stuff booked on it before we move forward on it, on getting it done. And with the basketball courts being in there, we have plenty of basketball courts throughout Willmar. We got the city auditorium, and I don't think that gets used like it should be getting used. We have plenty of basketball courts right now. That's the last thing we need, is to add something to the city that we have plenty of right now.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm seeing Councilmember Nelson raise her hand. And then Councilmember Fagerly, were you up as well?
No.
Councilmember Nelson.
I would like to ask Mr. Grammett to update the council on the current status of where we're at with bids for Swanson Field and with where we're at for bids on the event center and the recreation field. I'm feeling like we're not understanding where we're at and what are the next steps.
Mayor and City Council members, as was mentioned, the architect has met with the committees. They prepared plans and specifications. They've gone through the process, and obviously Robbins Island had a phase 1, which is almost complete. It'll be finished up this spring, and it has a phase 2, which is coming your direction. Which encompasses, well, I think it already did. It's the shelters and all the other parts of it that amount to the $3 million that was allocated towards that project. The Swanson Field had, I believe, gone out, been reviewed, and gone out to bid, come back with numbers that were, like $2.9 million of a $2 million budget. And the construction manager and the architectural firm worked with the committee to get that down under the $2 million mark. That includes all the soft costs and the hard costs. And they're bringing that forward in the very near future to have, here is our final design to stay under $2 million based on what we know, and get authorization to go out to bid. The recreation fields project has gone through the architect, gone through construction manager, gone through the entire process, and has been advertised for bids. So we will be getting, hard numbers as to what it actually will cost if it comes within budget. Something that is beneficial for them, excuse me, is they're not using any red steel. Red steel is an expensive commodity right now. If you think plywood is expensive at the lumber store, go try and buy red steel. But the recreation fields do not use that. There's not a lot of it there. So that's one plus, but we'll see how the bids come in shortly, within the next 20 some days, I would expect. The event center, again, architect met with construction manager, met with committee, tried to figure out what could be done, what can't be done, got their project under the $10 million number, and that has gone out for bid. And we're waiting, it might be 2 weeks longer than the recreation fields, but so as I go through this list of priorities, this is what was approved by the City Council: Swanson, Robbins Island, recreation fields, event center. Then came stormwater, $7 million of stormwater, and then came the community center at the very end, okay, for $2 million. And so the only two that have not really been designed is the stormwater, and we've done, I don't know, maybe 700,000 of that $7 million worth of projects that had been identified. We've done some because we just did it last year in the construction season. and the community center have not had any architect work on the design or, you know, with the construction manager at all. So the 4 highest projects have had everybody work on it, you know, including the committees. It's been before the city council. It's been authorized for bid, and we'll be getting those, like I say, probably within the next 20, 25 days. We should have numbers. And then we'll find out if it's under budget or not. And that's in essence where the tire hits the road. We'll have something that we can then depend on, or we have something we say the cost of red steel, like with the event center, is 10 times more expensive than we thought it was, you know, going to be. And we have to review the plans and specs in order to get it underneath the budget. Unfortunately, as everybody probably is well aware of, at this point, you go back and start changing the plans and specs. That's on our dime. You know, we have a project that the architect and the construction manager figures should be under budget. So, and we've got contingencies in there, so we've got a little bit of flexibility. If something goes up, maybe something else went down, but we still have money in the budget for unknown, you know, costs and unknown things. So I totally expect that the bids will come in reasonably at or within the budget. Then the question is up to the city council whether or not you want to proceed. You know, those are just the project considerations, but underlying that is the financing considerations. As you are well aware, I've sent this material out numerous times, is that we can only spend money on projects that we can support with our local option sales tax revenue. It's what we receive in for local option sales tax that's what supports the debt. And right now, the current revenues, we had a big spike here this last month because it was all equalized up and we hit, you know, over 200,000, but normally it's in the 180. We anticipate roughly 2.1 million, maybe 2.2 on the high end per year. And 2.1, 2.2 million supports about $21 million in debt. It's just like buying a house for $1 million. You need so much money per year to pay that debt off. So we have enough money coming in to cover Swanson, Robbins Island, the rec fields, and the event center. We have that much money according to priority that was set. What we don't have is the $7 million for the stormwater or the $2 million for the community center. So if you reprioritize and put on hold the event center, you've got $10 million that you're not going to spend, but that you have that revenue coming in that you could use it for stormwater, or you could use it to pay the debt off for the community center, $2 million. So that's a kind of a recap of more than you asked as far as the bidding process. Recap, we're getting within 20, 25 days of getting bids in on the 2 major projects. And if it's at or under budget, we have enough revenue coming in from the sales tax to cover that. So.
Councilmember Paulman. I'm sorry, Councilmember Nelson, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I did. I think it would also be helpful for the council to understand that if we make a different decision than the direction that we've gone forward, there are costs that will need to be paid to architects and I believe to construction managers. And I think that that's an important piece of information for us to understand. We are this far along in the process, and if we make a decision not to accept the bids, there will be a price, there will be dollars to pay. And I was just going to ask Mr. Grant to address that, and also to, if there's an estimate, to please share that with the council.
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, the architectural fees that we've incurred are probably 90%, maybe even 90% plus of what their contract was. And the construction manager, because most of theirs comes during the construction of the project, we've probably got 10 to 15% of their costs involved in that particular part of the project. So when we talk about the construction manager was right at, I believe it was $1.6 million. So 20% of that is we're into them for $320,000 to help the architect design and prepare the plans and specs. The architects, on the other hand, are probably, we're probably $1.8 million into designing all of these facilities. And at this point, you change anything and you just threw another $300,000 in redesigning the event center or taking a piece out of the recreation fields, as was referenced earlier, the softball fields, the 4-diamond complex there, that's in the project. That's not an alternate. So you all of a sudden lap that off, and you've got bids on a project you're not going to do, and so there's going to be wasted money if you decide to not proceed down the path that you have set before you, setting priorities and authorizing bids and waiting for them to come in. That there will be some dollars that will have to be respent, and we've tried to minimize that as much as we can, so we don't try and reinvent the same project 3 times over. We don't want the project cost to be all architectural design, and then when we get to the end, we got $2 million of architect design and no Swanson Field, and we're trying to keep that.
Okay, let's get back to the council. Councilmember Plowman, followed by Councilmember Osmus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was kind of reminded of something in doing some thinking, and I thought back to our last finance meeting where we had a lot of numbers that we discussed, and a lot of we went through all of the city's finances, and we're trying to diligently rely on our finance director to make us aware of all of our finances, where they're at, how they work, and whatnot. And I trust that. I trust the people that we have in place. But I was reminded when our speaker was talking tonight, but almost just a little bit alarmed too, but I think it's maybe just a little bit of something for us to consider when he was talking about the situation that they had in Duluth, and the fact that they were facing some financial hurdles in the city. That was the catalyst to a lot of their problems that they were experiencing, clashes on their city council. And I personally, I'm reflecting on his words, and I'm thinking here, isn't this ironic that we find ourselves where we're at right now, sometimes feeling overwhelmed. These are unprecedented times when the local option sales tax projects were being planned. That was years back now, and a lot has happened in between then and now, and it's all too easy for us to say woulda, shoulda, coulda, or we were gonna do this, or why didn't we do that? And I just personally, I want to make sure that myself in my own mind space, that I'm not being cynical, or I'm not being jaded in thinking that that somebody did something wrong, or that there's anybody to throw under the bus, or that anything like that. Because again, when we started this process, when this ball got rolling, this was a different year. We were in a different financial setup. The plan, the higher level, the 100,000-foot financial planning that was being done, was done the way that it typically is being done. You get overarching cost estimates for these things, but you can't really zoom in on those estimates until you start getting some of those soft costs spent, and until the architects really go to work and start actually putting the project together, getting stuff on paper, then you can start whittling away at those logs and start crafting what the project is going to be. And it's not until then that you can actually, you can't go to bid with a project that you only have 3 pages of bullet points on. You have to have a designed project. So in other words, you have to spend money before you find out what it's really going to cost you. That's the brutal reality of these types of projects. The other brutal reality is that our financial uncertainties and certainties and uncertainties have changed in between 2018 and 2021, where we find ourselves now. So just to circle back, I think it's really important that we remember what was said earlier about Duluth and just what the catalyst was to their difficulties, and that we make sure that we don't allow the difficulties that are facing us right now, although it can be overwhelming and it can feel like it's hitting us like a landslide. We don't need to let it send us as a council or as a elective body. It doesn't need to force us to act a certain way. It doesn't need to force our hand, so to speak. We may be forced to get creative. We may be forced to work hard and work diligent, but I hope that this could be a catalyst to us finding a way to work together, come together as a unified body, and make the tough decisions that we need to make, because there is no right or wrong answer for any of this, but right, wrong, or otherwise, we are elected officials for a reason, and we do have to make decisions on whether or not to move forward. But we can do that as was presented earlier, and I hope we do adopt, what was presented earlier as something that we use moving forward. We shouldn't let this particular issue with the local option sales tax projects and the community center and the city hall and how they all tie together. I would hope that this isn't, that this isn't the catalyst that splits us all apart or divides us even further. Rather, when we come up with solutions, and I say when very intentionally, when we come up with solutions for this, this can be something that can really move our community forward. But this is the task that's in front of us, and so I guess I'm going to just leave it at that. Will be my intention moving forward. Is I haven't made a decision whether or not to proceed on everything or put everything on hold or anything like that, but just to make sure that we are that we're well-rounded in our approach, and that we're making sure that we're doing our due diligence and hearing everybody out. And I appreciate the discussion that's happening tonight, and thank you everybody for taking part and speaking respectfully towards it, offering good ideas, good perspectives. I think if we can continue with this dialogue in the manner that we are right now, we'll get places. And so I appreciate that from everybody, and thank you for letting me speak. I'm done now.
Okay, Councilmember Osmus.
Thank you. Mr. Gramitz, when you refer to the priority list, I think I had too many pieces of paper and too much in my 3-ring binder. Where is that and what was that? Because I thought I read something today that put the event center below stormwater and that was from Matt. Did that priority list, did that come from the Invest in Willmar committee? That came from us?
That was a recommendation by the Invest in Willmar committee to the city council, to which you adopted their recommended priority level.
Okay.
Now that goes back to even before the programs had their plans and specs finished up, of course, because that's what was going to drive it. There have been reiterations of the priority list that I have seen, but none adopted by the city council. Okay. That was somebody saying, here's how I see the world, and if I was going to spend if this was my own money, this is what I would do.
Okay.
It was all offered to maybe light the way.
Okay.
But what the city council adopted was basically what the priority that I mentioned was. The only caveat to that is that the stormwater wasn't going to be all done with a $7 million bang and we're going to fix all of our stormwater. That was going to be done over the next 13 years, a little bit every year. And so one could say that the priority of putting stormwater in there as the fifth item probably wasn't as accurate as it was, because we already have done some stormwater, you know?
Exactly.
And so that was kind of what I call the fluff, the float. So when we had money, we would do stormwater. If all we had was money to pay the debt of the other projects, we'd pay the debt. And then if we got more money again, we'd do more stormwater. That's how it was explained to me. There was not going to be a $7 million bond issue that we were going to pay off. It was just going to be projects throughout the 13 years as we collect the money as they happen. Now, one year you might do one, and next year you might do none at all. And then the following year you might do a big one.
Right.
So that does, I guess, you know, it makes a difference in my mind. It's not real a hard and fast priority list.
Right.
But that was the sequence that was submitted.
And that's, okay. And that's, as far as like stormwater, the way I understood it, the way I looked at it was all these other projects, people got on board with them because that was their project that they wanted to see get done with the local option sales tax. And they probably would have liked to have seen those in the next 3 to 5 years, where the stormwater was, like you said, going to happen over time. And that was where some of the funds that came in later were going to happen over the 13 years. But so I had questions about that priority list, but really what it comes down to is reality. The reality is we're going to be $9 million short. So when we look at what we could give the citizens and what we can do for the community and what we need and what their wants were with the local option sales tax, we're going to have to change. We're going to have to make some decisions, hard decisions, on the priority list. And that's where I think the event center being the largest chunk, I mean, we couldn't say that we were going to do those top 4 local option sales tax projects and then not put anything towards the community center and not put anything towards stormwater. I can't look at the people in Willmar and say, we're not going to do anything about stormwater, because that is something that affects every citizen. That affects all homeowners. And where some of these other projects, it's the baseball club or it's the hockey players. Everybody has their different piece that they wanted to have for what they were, passionate about. So yes, at some point, we are going to have to make a decision about what isn't going to get funded. And we are going to lose some money in architectural fees because of that. That's the reality. And somewhere, hopefully in the next couple of months, we're going to figure out what we're going to have the money to be able to do and what's going to have to get cut. And that's reality.
Okay, what I'm hearing being said here tonight, and if council members who wish to speak, and again, I can't see council member Osk, so council member Butterfield.
Yeah, the reason we put this out for bid for the event center was just to get the hard numbers so we could help make our decision on that. That was the main reason. That was the main reason we put that one out for bid. And I was under the understanding if numbers didn't come in, we shot it down. Yeah, we're going to be out those architecture fees. Just because we have them doesn't mean we have to bid on the project and award that project. Our consensus here was we wanted hard numbers on that event center, and that's the way we were going to get them. That was my understanding of it. And for the baseball fields, Rick brought up a good point. If these baseball, softball fields are undersized, how is Willmar's baseball, softball community supposed to bring in tournaments into the city? Now we have for fields that are undersized and we can't utilize in a tournament. You know, and that's big money for some of these traveling baseball teams and for the city coming in, people staying at hotels, eating out at restaurants, everything like that. We need to get these ball fields up to par where we're going to make some money on it. And it's just like with the Civic Center I brought up before. Let's find out, see how much money we are pulling in on events out there. You know, if it's the event center is really needed, if they're that full, or the event center needs to be built right now if we're filled up out there with events. I don't think we are. I haven't seen too many events except for the home show, the spring show, and a few other shows like that, and then a spring rummage sale through the city. Other than that, I think that building is pretty empty when there's no ice on there.
Additional comments or questions? Otherwise, I think we're getting to a point where we can ask staff to bring back after finance brings their report, probably at the same time, some consensus on what. So what I'm hearing the issues being said is, let's find out what those numbers are. Let's bring that back so we have hard numbers. Let's look at what type of revenues we can project and what the true cost of operating the projects are, including depreciation. And then the council's gonna have to make some tough decisions. Also on the City Hall project, after that funding report comes back from finance, we'll be in a better position to make some informed decisions. So that's kind of what I heard, the synopsis of what I have. Is there something that I may have missed? Otherwise, or anybody else have any comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Mayor Calvin?
Councilmember Osk.
could Parks and Rec also work on maybe kind of responding to Councilmember Fagerly's questions about fields being undersized and Councilmember Butterfield's questions about how often the rec center is currently being utilized?
Mayor Calvin?
Staff, can we get that report and have it sent out to the council, please? Councilmember Nelson.
Yes, I think fast pitch softball is alive and well. And those fields are replacing the high school softball fast pitch fields. So they need to be fast pitch fields. So I'm worried that we're passing judgment when all of this information has been reviewed, and I think it fits with what Councilmember Osk mentioned, that, you know, we have listened to these. There is a reason why it was designed the way it was, and they are different fields for different uses than baseball, and for different ages also. And so if we're questioning that, then we need another presentation on why we're doing what we're doing, because we did do that. So I just want us to be careful when we make our decision with understanding why the projects are the way they are.
Additional comments or questions? City Administrator Gramitz, do you kind of have a synopsis there on the questions we're looking for answers for? And I know that this is going to go towards to finance, but are you clear what we're looking for?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and City Council members, we'll get the answers to the question you just posed here tonight, but we'll involve finance, recreation, and whoever needs to be to get the information you're looking for.
Okay, I'm going to stop on a positive note here. It's very encouraging to hear that the revenues that are coming in are in that 200,000 range for the last month. So having worked on these for years, we all know that there is reconciliation that happens. Well, that word wasn't right. They reconcile the numbers and then we get an updated report. So that's encouraging to hear. So unless there's something else, I would entertain a motion that we adjourn the work session.
Didn't Rick have something else that you wanted?
No, it's okay. I'll make a motion.
Oh, I didn't hear that. I didn't see that. Councilmember Fagerly.
No, that's okay. That's fine. I make a motion to adjourn.
I didn't see that. I apologize. Is there a second on the motion to adjourn from
Yes,
Councilmember Fagerly? Motion been made and seconded. We are adjourned.